Hello. Unless you are in one of those moments where you clicked on something, you're not quite sure how you got here. I imagine you're trying to find out what this course called Climate Science, a discussion for everyone, is all about. Um, I can tell you that answer, what it's all about, and will in just a couple minutes. Of course, you'll be the judge if what I intended to do actually works out. Um, my name is Patrick Love. I am retired physicist. I say retired, I still do a little consulting. I got a PhD way back in another era in 1977 from Washington University in St. Louis. I then went to work in geophysics my PhD was actually in experimental astrophysics. I went to work in geophysics looking for better ways to explore for oil and gas. I did that for 8 years, and then I went to work for Alcoa, the aluminum company, for 28 years, mostly in research associated with machine control and artificial intelligence and things like that. And a lot of it in manufacturing engineering, which is what I still do some consulting on. I got interested in this topic of climate science, climate change in particular, because reading media accounts of it, I was constantly befuddled by how the politics of either the left or the right seemed to confuse the scientific message. After all, this is, at least the first few questions in it, are science questions, and so one needs to go figure out what the scientists are actually trying to say in defense of the media. Of course, they are often limited to 400 words and sometimes presenting the outcome of a scientific experiment in 400 words is very, very difficult to do. So the course is intended for people who want a more complete understanding of what we know and what we don't know about this important topic. I start out with 3 lectures on the basics of climate, how the climate works. We don't get into a lot of detail, we don't do a lot of physics, but we basically understand some of the basic factors and how the climate works and get you close down to understanding the weather. We don't get into meteorology because that gets pretty detailed pretty fast. Then we move on, using that background, we move on to 2 questions about is it warming? 2 lectures on is it warming? And then 2 more lectures on why it might be warming and what we know about that. Then we go to 2 lectures on what we might be worried about. And finally, 2 lectures on what we could do about it if we wanted to act to reduce risk, right? Now, this course is aimed at folks who may remember some very basic science. You don't really need to remember any math. I think there's only 2 equations in the whole course, and I guide you through them. So it's really kind of a high school course. It does require that you look at a lot of graphs and a lot of data, and but probably more tedious than that, you have to listen to me for a long time. And you will notice that with this course, I'm not going to win any jobs from on-air personalities. So I go a little deeper here and there, but I do try to make sure you walk away with the basic ideas that you need to understand what's going on. I have taught this course twice at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Florida State, cumulatively to over 100 students at this point. And with a great mixture of backgrounds. These tend to be people with all different kinds of backgrounds. I would say mostly, almost all older adults. I would say that what I've noticed about these students is they share a real curiosity about the subject that overcomes any concern they might have about working through a little mental confusion. I assure you, as in my scientific career, I've spent the majority of my time in some confused state one way or the other, hoping to work my way out of it. I hope these lectures don't leave you confused at the end, but they should leave you with some information that you could that will help you understand where we are in this idea and these ideas. I do recommend a couple of books. There is a very basic book by, I believe it's Andrew Dessler, called Introduction to Modern Climate Change. He's a Texas A&M climate scientist. It's a little older book now, 2012, but still the concepts are good. And then if you want to hear an economist's take on this issue, you can read a book by called The Climate Casino by William Nordhaus. I think that's published by Yale University Press. The Dessler book is published by Cambridge University Press. And Nordhaus, you may know that name if you've noticed recently, if you read up on the Nobel Prizes. He just won the Nobel Prize for Economics and has some things to say about this subject. I want to quickly acknowledge a few people. I have talked to lots of people on this topic, and I have read lots of papers and so on and so forth, but I would acknowledge Dave Kessler, a friend of mine from college, who read through a lot of the very preliminary slides and had some good feedback. Paul Thomas, who's a guy I've talked to a lot, a friend from Alcoa, executive with Alcoa, and he has provided a lot of feedback on economics and some of the thinking behind economics that might affect this problem. Jeff Chanton, who's a climate scientist at Florida State, who reviewed the slides just before I taught my class the first time. And Sam Adams, who runs our local chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby and is always a source of enthusiasm and energy on this topic. I would thank you ahead of time for taking an interest in this important problem and spending some of your valuable time learning more about the details. I'm hoping, oh, one more thought. You can jump around a bit in these lectures. They are linked. If the lectures that are the two-part things, like 2 parts about, lecture 4 and 5 are about is it warming, you should watch 4 before 5. However, you can jump from question to question without losing too much continuity. You can always go back. Thanks a lot.